Cars, Coca-Cola, and AI. What a nice range of topics, but we know you're really tuned in to find out who is eliminated in our Survivor League for Ankerstar Wealth. Today, this is a financial education presentation. You must do your own due diligence on anything you hear in this presentation. More disclaimer information can be found on ankerstarwealth.com, and the opinions expressed are mine and Corey's alone. So I know this is an incredible positive week. Corey continues to live with Texas A&M staying undefeated, so he can enjoy another week of this. And the positivity is just radiating out. I'm not saying the market's screaming higher, but I'm saying I see good news. So let me share some good news. Here we go on General Motors. Whether you drive a GM car or Ford or Tesla or Honda or whatever the other ones are out there, this is good news. When GM stock comes out, and automotive is pretty competitive, and if there was going to be a major tariff impact, it'll definitely hit automotive. If there's going to be a slowing economy, which there is, it's slowing, it'll definitely hit General Motors and the automotive industry. So when they come out and they raise guidance, beat earnings, I mean, I just saw good news all the way. I did want to highlight just a couple things. One, they for next year, they said they're expecting a smaller tariff impact than previously forecast. You know, that's good news. And then as far as the actual beat, earnings per share, they reported $2.80 versus $2.31. Revenue was up. This is just great news. So, so we'll take it. You remember one of the things when, as investors and owners of companies, we are very dependent on what the consumer is doing. But if people out there are buying cars and GM believes they're going to continue to buy more cars, that is great news for us. I'm going to go on to another one. Exactly, same thing again. So this is Coca-Cola. It's kind of like cars are this major purchase, but buying a bottle of Coke or whatever drinks they all sell, is really, hitting the lowest income consumer, because I believe most people can afford it, but they also beat on earnings. However, there is one piece out in here that I really wanted to call out. Now, just so everyone knows, I used to drink a lot of Coke Zero. That was one of my favorites. Diet Mountain Dew was another, so that was Pepsi. Those were my two ones. So when I quit drinking Coke 5 years ago, I knew this company would be affected. That's how much I drank, Corey, that, they
Oh, were
probably.
you like an avid user?
Oh, I was an avid user. I was an avid consumer of Coke products. So, it's just nice that now they've been able to rebound from the Mike Youngman, stoppage. So,
Wait,
anyways,
were the Coke Zeros like addictive?
dude, they're all addictive.
But
I don't
how
know. They're
where
all addictive.
what part of the Coke Zero is addictive?
For me, it's carbonation. I just like the carbonation in there.
Oh, I
Of
see.
course, I would always justify and say, there's 0 calories, so it's really not that bad. And then other people would tell me that's actually worse and I should drink the sugar ones. And I'm like, well, I don't know. But I drank a lot of it. In fact,
I don't
I
think
did
there's
my
anything worse than the sugar ones. I don't know.
I'll just tell you that I did my major papers for my MBA sitting down at Burger King, where I would go down for 6 hours and say, I'm just going to write this paper while I drank Diet Coke. So that's not good, but at least I graduated. But here's what I want to point out on this, because I think this is important going forward, and we're going to be talking about this with our investing team. So volume in Latin America and North America was flat. But they increased sales, right? So they are seeing it increase internationally. They're seeing some different segments internationally, and they're also seeing some other segments of drink, whether that's water. I don't know why you paid for water from Coke, but maybe coffee and tea segment. So they're starting to do some innovation here too. They're not just selling the same old sugar water that was invented in 100 years ago. They're leveraging it. And one advantage that Coke has is they have a distribution network. So if they come up with a new drink, they've already got it set that they can throw it on the truck and distribute it to, whatever, 10,000 different gas stations or whatever. And this is why it's hard for new companies to bounce in here, because Coke's distribution channel. And then the other thing is, of course, another company could pay Coke for that distribution channel. So these are just advantages that they have out there. How about you, Corey? Coke, Pepsi, what's your preference?
Yeah, neither. Coca-Cola, that's the drink company. And I think, you go Pepsi, you're more of a snack company over there. They get, I think, a majority of their revenue from snacks. Coke is probably 80+% revenue from drinks. I know Coke has been crushing it. They bought that Fairlife milk brand, and that brand, they got a really good deal on that. It was probably a few years, 3 years ago or something. But they really have grown that brand in the milk category a lot. So they have offerings in really every category. The only category that Coke and Pepsi have just totally never cracked is energy drinks. So Coke finally gave up. I don't remember what year. Coke just gave up, which I think they still might own one brand, but they took a stake in Monster. So they own a stake in Monster, and Pepsi gave up, and they own a stake in Celsius. They own, I think, it's over 10% of Celsius now. So, yep, that's the only category they never cracked.
It's interesting. I mean, this is a 5-year graph, and maybe this was the year back in 2021 when I quit and it dropped there. Now that might have been COVID. But one thing is Coke, it pays a dividend yield of, almost 3%. So this is one of those companies but it's worth $305 billion. So this is not a small company, but it's one of those companies that just kind of slowly grows. It's not like NVIDIA. It doesn't have the ups and downs. So anyways, okay. So talking about ups and downs, before we get to Corey and we go into AI, we got to talk about the downs. And the downs happen every Tuesday when I must report out on the teams that have been eliminated from the 2 conferences of Ankerstar Wealth's Football Challenge. Now, I will start off by saying both owners have the name Steve, but only one is Steve Ankerstar. But we'll start off with the Steve of the West, and this is not the Steve Ankerstar team. This is a different Steve. Very interesting. I'll just say that they had Dak Prescott, who actually outperformed his expectations, but then, Saquon Barkley just let them down. That's one of their main players. No one would ever argue with that pick. Justin Jefferson, no one would argue with that pick. It's just kind of a letdown, and this team barely lost. I think what's interesting about it, though, is when Steve Ankerstar got eliminated from the West, he also had Dak Prescott as a quarterback. So now we have a second team eliminated, taking Dak as the quarterback. And then let's move over to the East. Oh, my goodness. Steve Ankerstar picked Dak Prescott again and CeeDee Lamb, who actually both of them outperformed, but he was eliminated. Once again, running backs a little bit weak here. Ashton Genty and Kyron Williams. And in the Eastern Conference, we're only down to 4 teams, so it's pretty competitive. Everyone was very close. It is just funny to see Dak Prescott outperform, and both teams that had him are eliminated. So with that, we'll continue. I'll just say, as far as a financial lesson, and then I'm going to pull right out of this one. Steve had Jamar Chase, Cincinnati Bengal, who had set the Bengal record on his bench. And if he had started him, he would have won. And so how do you tie that into finance? There's times on your portfolio, hopefully not when it's managed by us, but on a portfolio, even it could be managed by us, you're not going to have that top performer. Maybe you miss it. Jamar Chase is a great player. Everyone knew that, but there was questions on the supply chain, the quarterback sending the ball to him, and therefore Steve sat him, which isn't totally surprising. So investing wise, there may be a great company, Coca-Cola, Berkshire Hathaway. There may be a great company and you're like, I know it's a great company, but I just don't think it's going to perform that well. So I don't have it in my model. It's sitting on the bench. I'm aware of it, but it's not in there. And when it shoots up, sometimes I'm like, oh, if I would have just had that in my portfolio. Fortunately, in the investing world, we can make corrections and add them. Unfortunately for Steve, he will not be adding him next week. Instead, he'll be released into the pool for the rest of us to pick up. So with that, Corey, take us to AI.
Yeah, we just I wanted to hit this, and this is that earnings week. So you're going to be hearing from us on a few of these companies. Some of them will be worthy of a deep dive, such as potentially a Netflix. Netflix, because of their business model, it's not necessarily like you're looking for fireworks, right? But you're looking for business as usual kind of stuff. But going into tomorrow, Tesla, yeah, you can get fireworks on Tesla. You go to Thursday, you're going to look Intel. That's going to be very interesting. You're getting that involvement from the government. What's going on there? And then as you go into next week, that's where we get to more of those big tech. But Netflix, Tesla, and you'll hear from us on a few of these others as well. IBM, they're one of those prominent players in the quantum computing space that then, they could be fielding some questions on that in their earnings call. Okay, I wanted to hit on this, Mike. I want to know your opinion. OpenAI released their version of TikTok, which, the normal version of TikTok, people are falling all over themselves to generate content for free to TikTok that they can then monetize and get a little kickback from if and only if that content generates attention and views, right? If you're not generating any content or views, then you're out. I mean, you're not getting anything from TikTok. Now, OpenAI in reverse, people can go and create content on OpenAI using the name, image, and likeness of anyone they want, dead, alive, whatever, to post on Sora. That is OpenAI's TikTok. And I'm curious to know your thoughts, Mike. Do you think the name, image, and likeness stuff is a concern at all, or is that no big deal? It's fake anyway. And then further, who do you think has a better business model? Do you think letting the AI generate videos? I've heard that each video it costs about $5 for OpenAI to make, but you can go and make as many as you want. Whereas then again, for TikTok, they're not paying anything for their content, kind of like YouTube, right? The people make the content like we're doing right now. So anyway, what do you think? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm very concerned that somebody could take our likeness and generate their own show with us talking. Actually, I'm not that concerned yet. but anyways, if someone does, I think I'll just brag and say, wow, somebody actually did that. Very cool. But I get it. Bryan Cranston, Breaking Bad, he's a little more well known than Corey or I. So my view on it is I think it's impossible to stop. I mean, I just don't. I mean, I understand the concern, but like if I was a person that could fake my voice and sound like Donald Trump, I could do that. And I've seen there's people out there that are like impressionists, and so they're allowed to do it. Now we're just letting the computer do it. So it's kind of like I just don't know how you would ever stop that. I heard another one where I can't remember what her name. Scarlett Johansson was worried about her voice or something being used, and I'm like, wow, like are we really? I mean, make your movies. You're making millions of dollars. If somebody uses your voice, I don't know that it's that big a deal. I will say on the creation of videos and content, no, I'm not on TikTok. And no, I don't think I'm on Sora 2. But here's one thing. I'll tell you that I am on Facebook. And I was just telling my wife yesterday It's like I get these little pop-up videos, and it's a little baby laughing, and a kitten like comes up and like jumps on them and pushes them back, and I have a hard time not watching it. And she's like, "That's totally fake. There's no way," or there's these little, just crazy videos, and I know they're AI made, right? It's not, that cat's really not going to do that. I don't think. So, but I have a hard time, like, and of course, once I clicked one time, now I get fed them in Facebook, right? So, for a while it was, people getting, 7-10 bowling splits, and then it was great golf shots, and now it's kittens jumping on babies. I don't know, or dogs pulling covers on babies. It's just, I know it's fake, but it's fun to watch. And I don't know that I take all of these videos that serious. But when I see it, it has like 2 million views, which is about 1.999 more million views than our show gets. So obviously people like it. I don't know. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I will say I do wonder if, forget about the ethical component, that's more up to other folks than me. I do wonder on the actual business component. You've seen these videos come out. It'll be SpongeBob, or it'll be, Bryan Cranston, or it'll be things that are actual intellectual property for other companies. And I wonder if there's any lawsuit stuff that goes on there as far as, hey, this is our intellectual property. It's not free, and clearly, your model has trained on these episodes of Breaking Bad, or trained on these episodes of SpongeBob, which it should not have been allowed to do, as our intellectual property. So I wonder if then, does there come a time where the creators need to start getting paid? And actually, I'll carry this into this. The creators of the original intellectual property need to start getting kickbacks from the models using their intellectual property. It seemed reasonable to me that would be the case, but again, we'll see what happens. I do want to. I'll show this. OpenAI, their revenues this year coming in 13. I've even seen 15 billion. I think these are some of their projections. They're going to need to be growing those revenues quickly. I think they have a $300 billion deal with Oracle. I know they have a $300 billion deal with Oracle. They're paying Oracle $300 billion over like a 5-year period, and that's just one of their business partners. So you can see they're going to be needing to drive significant revenue here, and these are their projections. So I think it'd be the fastest company from 10 to 100 billion. It's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And, do they start pumping ads into ChatGPT? Do they start pumping ads into Sora? And they try to catch up on this revenue? Obviously, you can see these different segments here. And this will be more important to talk about in the future. Some of these segments aren't really generating revenue yet. But that's kind of how I think of it, Mike, is they're going to need to turn on the money machine soon. And, how does that play out? What does that look like?
I think it's interesting, and let's take an example of music, and it's how it progressed through history, at least the history that I know, maybe not all the way back. But when I was a kid, I had a cassette player, and I would hear a song on the radio that I liked, and I would press record, and it would record that song onto the cassette, and then I would add another song and another song. And was I paying that artist any money? No, but it was played and I could listen to it back, right? I was just a kid, so don't get me in trouble. I don't have any of these cassettes anymore. Later on, certainly I purchased CDs when they came out. Yay, I like those. But when Napster came out, and I want to say this was the early 2000s, I said, let me see how this thing works. I picked some album, and within 20 minutes, I downloaded all the music at certainly a good enough audio quality that I liked it, and I could rip it to a CD. And I was like, this can't be legal. This is too easy. And I don't have any of those, and I just did it a few times, so I didn't get on the Napster bad list. But then, look how it continues on. And then you get iTunes. So I'm buying songs, and I bought a bunch of them. And then iTunes kind of starts to shut down, and Spotify takes over. And I made only subscription to Spotify. Kids love Spotify. So that's a progression from, copying it, but now Spotify, those artists get something. They may not be happy with what they get. I don't know, but they at least get something. I think we'll see the same thing with other, art. We call it art. People get paid. Cranston will get his Breaking Bad royalties. I don't know. I'm not worried about it. So anyways, that's just a progression. Now we'll see what happens with AI and images, but there'll be a policing of some sort. Artists will not, the ones like Bryan Cranston will make their money, and Corey and I probably will not, but that's all right. So with that, I thank you all for joining. Hey, I will put on, if you stayed to the end of this and you owned a GM car, I want you to reply back somewhere in the comments what kind of GM car you did own, because I made the similar post out on LinkedIn this morning. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.